All right. So, welcome everyone who is watching this video. My name is Curtis Sullivan from Vault of Midnight, and this is Ryan Claytor's interview.
Hello.
Hello, Ryan.
Hey, Curtis. Great to see you.
You too, man. Thanks everybody for joining us. Ryan Claytor is a comics artist, illustrator, kind of all-in-one person, right? You do everything on your books. You even self-publish them through your company, Elephant Eater Comic Book. You're also an assistant professor at MSU, where you teach, and I'm probably going to butcher this, and you can give me the details, but a comics art class or a comic studies class. And you also do a tour every year with your comics class as well to show off their books and so much more. So Ryan, tell us about yourself.
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you for having me on here. I really appreciate it, Curtis. I've been a big fan of Vault of Midnight ever since I moved out to Michigan. That's over a dozen years ago now, so it's great to be here. And you did a pretty good job of the introduction. I'm a university professor and a comic book artist, and I teach at Michigan State University. I teach a couple of comic studio classes there, and I'm also the coordinator of the comic art and graphic novel minor course of study. Okay. So if people are interested in the program there, you can go to tinyurl.com/MSU, like Michigan State University, MSU Comics Minor, and that'll take you right there. I also
let me jump in. We'll post that below in the notes too, so you don't have to remember that. But yeah, cool. Sorry, please continue.
Perfect, thank you. And I also do some illustration and design work. I design neon signs, and I also design watches for London-based company Mr. Jones Watches, and custom illustration stuff. In addition to the comics work that I do, like A Hunter's Tale, which is happening right now. You probably see the URL underneath me, ahunterstale.com. That'll take you straight to the Kickstarter campaign, which is live in January 2022. And that is my new book, A Hunter's Tale. And the script for that book is actually a poem that my late grandfather wrote about 40 years ago at this point. And it's this story about two seemingly very disparate subjects, a hunter and his prey, and this unlikely understanding they form of one another. Ultimately, it's a tale of reciprocated empathy, which I just feel is so gosh darn important right now. Yeah. Everything that we've all been through over the past couple years, from the pandemic to insurrection to George Floyd, I don't have to name it all. We've all been through it. But, in this difficult time that we've been going through, it's also been difficult to see people becoming increasingly isolated, and we can press a button and defriend people and not have to deal with them, and just essentially surround ourselves with people that look like us, talk like us, think like us. And I think that is really dangerous. I think we should be able to talk with people who think differently than we do. And that's, what this poem that my grandfather wrote is all about. And this poem is...
more people need to go out into the wild and face off against, maybe not face off, but challenge themselves with another living creature.
Right. And that can be taken in so many different ways, right? Yeah, but...
that'd be different, I think, from most people's average day, so, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, this poem has resonated with me for a very long time. I don't remember a time in my life when this poem hasn't been with me, but in the past year, I started working on this book about 6 months ago. It just kind of came to a head, and I thought, this is the time. This is the time when the world needs to hear this, when my cartooning chops are finally, I feel like they're kind of up to par with what I wanted to do with this story.
Can I jump in just really quick there?
Sure.
So this is an idea that you've wanted to illustrate for a long time, but you just you left it on the back burner till you felt, okay, now I've done enough stuff, I'm experienced, I can do this important, it sounds like to you, peace, justice.
Definitely.
Right
Yes.
on.
So
Yeah.
this poem, I feel like it's a little different from most poetry that I've encountered anyway. And that, all, granted, that's a somewhat limited frame of poetry because I'm not a big poet connoisseur, but most of the poetry I've encountered, you kind of have to like read it and reread it and try to understand what the author was telling you, kind of decipher what the words are trying to say. But with my grandfather's poem, it's pretty different. It was a very visual, very narratively driven poem. And I've always felt like, man, I want to make this poem visual. I want to make this in comics form. I want to collaborate with my grandfather in this way. And I felt like for a long time, my cartooning chops were not up to that. But, you know, I've been making comic books for almost 20 years at this point. And now I feel like, okay, I hope I can do this story justice now. So a bunch of puzzle pieces fit together over the course of this past year to really make that happen. And here it is at ahunterstale.com. Yeah.
No, that's very cool. The way you describe kind of, you know, you being in the right place to do it now artistically. And, you know, you mentioned, you think the world is in the place to hear it. It's really, really cool. So it's nice he sat on this, and now it's the time is, and the opportunity have all come together. So that's really, really rad.
Thank you.
Yeah, this is exciting stuff. I read the first few pages. It's really, really cool. I like how sparse it is. And, you know, just being in the wilderness, it was very evocative. I'm from Michigan, so I've spent a lot of time alone in the woods. And that the comic, at least the first few pages, really communicated that kind of that feeling that you have, the vastness of the wilderness. So being out there, so very cool.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I definitely got some inspiration from Michigan wilderness. From you probably read that double page spread where he's hiking out over that, you know, sort of field of grain or wheat or what have you, and that tree line that he enters in order to, you know, get into that forest. Like I've taken bike rides past places like that and just, you know, was so inspired. And so that definitely has some bearing on some of the imagery in there.
Right on. Well, you know, hey, let's dial it back just a little bit and talk a little bit about you and how you got your start in comic books. So I've known you for, I feel like maybe, I mean, it's been a decade plus coming around the shop. We've seen your comics. We've seen you as a publisher of many different things. How did you come to comic books? It's a kind of a niche art form, right, in the United States, right? It's not this uber prevalent thing. Like comics have been around and you know, have been in the background and now are the inspiration for TV and movies and everything else. But yeah, I mean, it's pretty interesting when somebody chooses like comics as their profession. To me, I always find it like really amazing that somebody can do it and has continued to do it for so long. So yeah, how did you come to this as a profession or an art form? Yeah.
I started reading comics as a kid. You know, when I was like 5, 6, 7 years old, I was reading the Disney Duck books mainly, you know, Donald and Uncle Scrooge. And as I aged up a little bit and was able to start appreciating satire, I started getting interested in the work of Sergio Aragonés and reading Gru the Wanderer. And he was a big influence on me. And, you know, got around high school age and the typical leaving of comics for about a decade. And then toward the end of college, I got back into them in a big way in the early 2000s. And that led to an internship at Marvel Comics. And I came back and started producing my own work, my own self-published work in 2004. And I've been making comics ever since. You know, I went to grad school from about 2005 to 2007 at San Diego State University. I was living in California before I moved to Michigan, and working on comics in grad school, wrote my master's thesis on autobiography and comics. And my wife, who also grew up in San Diego, well, I did not grow up in San Diego. I went to grad school in San Diego. She grew up there. We met, and she got this great gig at Michigan State University. and I came out with her. Like, she was the one who got the full-time gig, and I've sort of climbed the ladder since then. So yeah, I've been teaching comics here since 2009, and making comics since 2004, and here we are.
So how did you end up? Self-publishing is a big thing, right? So it's just, anecdotally, one would assume that getting a comic or a book or anything like published by another company would be tough to do. But on the flip side, to me, it's always seemed like that self-publishing has its own extreme set of challenges. You're already the creator, you're already doing all the work, and then you're paying for the printing, you're setting up all that back end stuff, you're setting up distribution, you're setting up, all of these other things. Like, how and why did you take that on in addition to all the creative source?
Yeah, I love talking about self-publishing, so I'm glad you asked that. When I first started making comics, I think it was a combination of, I wanted to make my interests, and I was reading a bunch of nonfiction stuff when I first started making comics, like autobio, true to life stuff, historical fiction, that sort of thing. And
in comic books?
In comic books, yeah. And so when I started producing comics, I thought, well, I'm going to make what I like, which was autobio work at the time. And, I was making these tiny little autobiographical strips, and, who's going to pick that up and publish it? So I self-published it. And
I didn't even submit it all to publishers, or?
No, not at the time. Well, you know what? I did occasionally take some work around to publishers at conventions, and but it was after I was self-publishing, just to show them, because I thought, well, it might be nice to get in with a publisher and then maybe make a bigger name for myself. And I used to feel some sort of way about self-publishing, like I was never truly accepted or vetted by whoever, whatever. I don't know, but as
classic,
time has
imposter syndrome, they call that, right?
Yes, exactly. So
can I just say really quick, when I saw your first books, when you approached us to sell your comics, I think, what was the book? Don't let me remember this. Oh, I can't remember. They were small. They had these amazing, the production value was incredible.
Probably my autobio work, And Then One Day.
Yes, that's the one.
Yeah.
And we were blown away. So the level of, as a store, seriously, the level of books that we see, the production quality is so much lower, and that's not a complaint or a diss. Like, I love that handcrafted nature books. However folks do it, if it's staples, it's glue, it's stitch, that's all really, really cool. But we were always blown away at the shop at your level of prowess. We thought those books were so sharp and sat right on the rack next to, pick a publisher that we thought was the coolest shit in country, like Sonic Quarterly or Fantagraphics, So I just got to throw that out there. Don't sell yourself short. I thought those early books, I understand the feeling, but man, we always thought they were so slick, dude.
Oh, man.
I mean that as a compliment, not slick, bad, like just really well built, yeah.
Well, thank you very much. So I was always trying to put my best foot forward in that regard, in terms of design and publication process. And so anyway, I mentioned that it made me feel some sort of way, but the more I've marched forward in my career, the more people I've talked to, the more artists I've talked to. And, as you move on in your career, you start talking to more and more lauded professionals. And I kept hearing more and more horror stories of people who have been not treated well by publishers, and from people and publishers you would just think, surely not, no, that could not be. And I've just been more and more thankful as the years have progressed that I have self-published from the very beginning, because now I don't have to worry about my IP being held onto by someone who doesn't want to publish it, but they have it in perpetuity or for a particular number of years, or not being paid. Like, I pay myself, so I know exactly how much I'm making or how many books I'm producing. I talk to artists who just have no idea about any of that stuff. So I think it was helpful that I was an artist who kind of enjoyed the publication process, the business side of things, the promotional side of things. You here right now are part of this big wacky tour that I put together for myself. So every single day of the month of this Kickstarter campaign for ahunterstale.com, I'm talking with a different media outlet. And, a publisher would not put something like that together for an artist. And it's something that I enjoy doing, is talking with folks like yourself and getting the word out about new work of mine. So, I think publishers these days look for artists who have a following and have done a lot of work to gain that audience before the publisher even considers publishing them. But in my opinion, as an artist, if you've done all that work already, then why hand all that work over to someone else and allow them to profit off of all your hard work? I don't understand it. I mean, I know there are gradients to this in terms of, being published and the benefits to that, and self-publishing and the benefits to that. But that's kind of where I sit. I'm a big proponent of self-publishing.
Well, that's awesome, and it sounds like you have an interest in that stuff too, and that's that maybe that magic sauce that a lot of people really struggle with, like business side, promotion side, or there's so many. You're wearing a lot of hats.
Definitely.
It sounds like so. Good on you. That's excellent. Well, next one I've got here on my bullet points of questions is creative inspirations. Was there any book or creator or comic that really sent you on the road, I need to do this. This is what I want to do.
Yeah. It was funny. I was reading a very tiny comic book called Tradition by a Hmong American artist named Duachaka Her. And it came as a companion comic to Craig Thompson's Ginseng Roots. And it was, 4 1/8 by 5 1/4 inch book, just a tiny little book, only 16 pages long. And when I got done reading through that, I literally took out a ruler, measured 4 1/8, 5 1/4. I'm like, I want to make something like this. I want to make this book. And I called up my printer and I said, hey, can we make this happen? And they said, yep, we can print something like that. And I even wrote Dua, who I'm going to be interviewing here next week, because I really want to put a spotlight on her and her work. I don't think that she's very well known, and I'd love to get some more eyes on her work. So anyway, her book was a big inspiration for format for A Hunter's Tale. It is literally the exact same size, 4 1/8 by 5 1/4 book size. And so that was an inspiration. And then, I talked about everything that's been happening over the past couple of years and my interest in, of course, my grandfather's work. I was sort of revisiting that over the course of the pandemic and sort of finding solace in that. And when I hit that poem, A Hunter's Tale, much like whenever I read through his poetry, I'm always just stopped dead in my tracks when I hit that poem, and just have to sort of sit back and experience the feeling, the message, that comes with that poem. And I'm always so taken aback by that. So it really all just hit me at the right time. But as far as inspiration, I mentioned Sergio Aragonés, who's a big, part of my Mount Rushmore of cartoonists. If I were to, elevate, just a handful of cartoonists, he would be one of them. I really love the work of Emile Ferris. I'm sure you know her work from My Favorite Thing is Monsters.
Very amazing.
And Canadian cartoonist Seth is another really heavy hitter in my book. I just love his pacing and style and attention to book design. He has really great work.
Yeah, for sure. Awesome. Do you have any favorite comic books currently? What are you reading currently for inspiration as far as comic books?
I've got my subscription to Craig Thompson's Ginseng Roots. That's a big one. I really enjoy how he's exploring his past, but then doing it in a really researched way. But then every page of that book is like, it's like he's deliberately refusing to use a traditional comics panel grid. Like there is no grid on any page, but it's still very easy to read. You understand where you're supposed to move in the page. You're never confused as to what comes first, but just so experimental, such a masterclass in alternative page layout. It's incredible. So I'd cite that one as a big current influence.
Yeah, Craig Thompson, is such a master. It's unbelievable, and I love that they went from kind of long form original graphic novels to Ginseng Loose, which is, like you said, a little more experimental. It's single issue format, it's a smaller size. I just love it so much.
And it's so cool that he knows it's building to the single book, and that's fine. But I love the fact that we're able to follow along with him currently, and that they're including things like the letters column where people can interact with him a little more over the course of the process. And then he's even got like comics from his brother Phil, who, you know, we all met via blankets. And it's an incredible publication.
Awesome. That's fantastic. So, hey, let's talk a little bit about your tour. You mentioned a little bit that you're doing an interview every single day for the Kickstarter. How does this... So I'm just going to say it sounds Looney Tunes. It sounds like too much. It sounds crazy pants. I don't understand it. Because you're already like publishing the comic, doing the comic, you know, trying to eat food and sleep and live a life. So what are we talking about here? Is this a 90-day thing? What's happening with this? It sounds like so much.
Yeah. So it looks like complete and utter insanity when you look at that tour graphic. Because there's literally
an art for the tour graphic, and I was like, you know what I mean? I don't understand this. It was just, you know, I mean, what are you going to print it at? Like, you know, 30 by 50, so it's readable. You know what I mean? Like, it's like ridiculous.
Yeah, it's pretty wild. I got this wild hair idea in my head that I would like to really make a big deal out of A Hunter's Tale, because I'm so proud of it. I want my grandfather's work in more people's hands, and I think that people are going to enjoy it, and I want to preserve his legacy and extend it. So I was trying to think of ways to really, make a bang out of this Kickstarter campaign that's happening right now. So I've done tours in the past, but, you know, we're still in a pandemic, and I'm not interested in going out and meeting face to face this many times throughout the month. So I thought, well, maybe I can do something online. And then that kind of snowballed into, well, what if I did something every day of the campaign? And it sounded like an unreasonable thing to me at the time. And I thought, you know what, I'll just give it a go. And if we don't get 31 days, that's okay. Like something big will happen. Something reasonable size for the tour will happen. But then it started getting closer and closer. And I'm like, well, maybe 31 days will happen. And sure enough, it did. So thank you for being a part of that 31-day tour and being willing to meet with me.
Like pulling, like, you know, I had to rearrange, you know, 31 days in a row, my guy. That is unbelievable. In, you know, the slowest, most not busiest time of the year, I imagine, for you. Like December, who's doing anything in December? You know, taking it easy.
I've been putting this together for a little bit now. I think the earliest interview I had was 4 months before my campaign launched. I started putting the word out. And so I've been sort of trickling them in and scheduling them so that they all hit during that month. So it's not live every single day. I've got a few lives over the course of the month, but I did my best to do as many pre-recorded interviews and written interviews as possible. So, you know, the tour graphic will tell you how it panned out.
Well, you thought it through. Well, that is awesome, man. So besides A Hunter's Tale, right, which is what the tour is about, I know I was looking through the latest previews catalog, which is the big old monthly huge book from the world's, well, I guess there's a few more comics distributors now, but the world's biggest forever comics distributor, Diamond. And I noticed you have
Yep,
a new book in there, my friend.
that's right.
This is the Coin-Op
Op Carnival is the name of the
Carnival.
publication. Yep.
There we go.
And if people are interested in taking a look at what that book looks like, you can go to coinopcarnival.com, and we've got preview pages there. But as Curtis mentioned, it's currently in Diamond Previews well, we're recording this in December, so it might be a little past due, but it'll probably be in stores in January, actually. So maybe this is timely.
Yeah,
But
give
yeah.
your local comic shop. They can make it happen for you too. So yeah.
Yeah. So Op Carnival is a publication I am incredibly proud of. It is co-written with myself and one of my very best friends. His name is Nick Baldridge, and we are both bonkers about pinball. And we wrote this whole book about electromechanical arcade games. So old pinball and arcades prior to the advent of, video screens and printed circuit boards, like basically everything that was manufactured prior to 1978, when they still had like switch technology and relays and stepper motors and physical mechanics that were moving everything inside.
So all analog, would that be the right word?
Yeah. So basically, we've got everything in there, from an interview with the most prolific pinball designer of all time. His name is Wayne Nyans, and he was 100 years old when the publication was released, and he is now 103 years old and still with us to this day.
Awesome.
Yeah, he's an incredible person. So we've got that interview. We've got a couple of game reviews, one of an electromechanical pinball machine and another of an electromechanical arcade game. We also have a tech segment which walks you through how relays work, and product spotlight, as well as papercraft models of the reviewed games from the issue, and a letters column. It's just jam-packed with stuff. 64 pages, full color, illustrations on every page, and some of them are full-blown comics. I'd say about 20% of the issue is full comics pages, and the rest is mainly like illustrated prose, kind of like a magazine, but with illustrations instead of pictures.
Very cool. And this is going to be an ongoing series of comics, quarterly, yearly? What's sort of the schedule on this?
It is a 4-issue limited series, and we are not making any projections as to when the next one will come out. We're hoping it'll be in the next year or two, because it took us like 2+ years to make the first one.
That's a huge book, 64 pages. That's a massive undertaking.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
That's awesome. Really quick, before we move on to the next thing, is there any other projects or any upcoming things you want to plug? I mean, you've already got these 2 massive things. Is there anything else in the pipeline? Is there any past work that you'd like to shine a spotlight on that's still available from you?
If people want to check things out from me, they can go to eater.com. All my work is there, but really I am so firmly focused on this Kickstarter campaign right now. I'm not seeing too much further ahead than that. So I'd really like to point people to ahunterstale.com.
Awesome. And really quick, I forgot to ask you this. I didn't write it down because I was sure I would remember it, but I forgot until just now. The name Elephant Eater comic book. Super hilarious. Your logo is like a big old elephant flag with like a cartoonish, bite out of it. Talk to us. Where did this come from? And
totally.
Yeah. Super hilarious, but what's up with that?
So that is actually from a saying that my dad used to tell me and all my brothers and sisters when we were young. He'd say, well, it's like eating an elephant. You just do it one bite at a time, and before you know it, you're done. So, I think about that whenever I have big tasks in front of me, like going through school or making a book or, making your 5th retail location in Michigan or whatever you happen to be doing, So it's a sentiment that has served my family very well. So it's got some, close ties to me. Yeah,
that's good stuff. Yeah, it's barely enormous. It's merely gigantic,
right?
As they say. Yeah, that is very funny, man. What about your work process, really quick? I want you to paint us a picture really quick. So you do a lot of comic books. what's your comic dojo like? Are you a jazz man when you do comics? Like, what's the creative process look like in the Elephant Eater studio?
I am very not much a jazz man. I am very like beep boop methodical and
You're very analog. You're very
yeah.
electromechanical,
Right.
as they would say.
Yeah, so I'll start out with a script. In the case of A Hunter's Tale, it was my grandfather's poem, so that already kind of took care of itself, but it needed to be adapted to comics form. So I'll actually start with the layout of comics in Adobe Illustrator, like a vector art program, so
Mm,
that I can quickly move panels around to what I need. So if there's like a climactic plot point on the page, then I can make that bigger. Or if there's a
I see.
series of like democratically structured panels where each one occupies the same amount of space on a page, I can easily boom, 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 lay that out real quickly instead of having
Mm,
to do a whole bunch of measuring. So that makes my job laying out a page a lot easier. And I can letter things that way too. So once I've got that, then I'll take that vector layout into a digital penciling program. I use Clip Studio Pro, and I'll digitally pencil there. And then I will print out my digital pencils on a sheet of Bristol, at
yeah,
which point I will hand ink everything, lettering, panel borders, characters, environments. Everything is hand inked on a physical piece of paper.
yeah.
And then I'll scan that back in to digitally color in Photoshop. So I'm really like, it's a convoluted process where I'm in and out of a lot of different programs, from Clip Studio
Yeah.
to Illustrator to hand inking to Photoshop coloring to InDesign for the page layout of the book. But I have taught these graphic design programs for a very long time. So they are just like extensions of my body, and I have a hard
Yeah.
time thinking without them. So it
Sure.
feels natural to me to use those programs for like what they're good for. But
Yeah.
honestly, it's also come from a lot of reading other people's process and seeing what works for them and like aping what I think would work well for me. So it sounds crazy and convoluted, and it probably is, but
Oh,
it's what works for me, and I love being able to hear what works for other people and kind of take what I need.
yeah, for sure. No, I think that the process, like you say, is informs all of it for each individual. So yeah, very
Mhm.
cool. And you said this is what you teach as well, like in class, the way your process, or
Uh,
just
so,
pieces of it.
So I would not say I teach my process specifically, but I do
Right.
teach like comic book lettering. I teach
Mm,
how to
mm.
do that in an analog way and a digital way so
Oh,
that
cool.
students can do whatever they want to. I teach them about different inking tools. I show them nib pens and brush pens and actual brushes and fixed width pens and digital ways to ink things. And then they can make their own decision about what they want to
Sure.
do. So yeah, it's really across the board. And I tell them, because inevitably the question will come up, like, what do you do to make comics, Ryan?
Yeah.
And I'll say, well, okay, here's my process, but that does not mean that is the way to make comics. That
Sure.
is a way to make comics. And if you start reading process posts from different artists, you'll find a multitude of different ways to make comics. Like when
Right.
I first started, I thought like there was a right way to make comics and I better figure that out. But that is not the case. The longer you're around, you figure out, oh, okay, everybody's just doing what works for them, and that's what works for me.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I saw how comics were made when I started reading comics. Now it's probably around, when I saw comics were made, it was probably 1982 or 1984, and then I
Mhm.
didn't see again until 2010. And I was like, oh, okay,
Things have changed.
there's a lot of different stuff going on. There's a
Yeah.
lot of different processes because in 1984 there was just the one way.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, it was very cool, very eye opening. Like, oh yeah,
Yeah.
things have kept moving along. So that's very
Mhm.
cool. That about wraps us up. Thank you so much, my dude,
Oh,
for joining us, talking about your new book. We wish you the best with A Hunter's Tale, a successful launch. We're looking forward to Op Carnival as well. We'll be ordering it at all Vault of Midnight. So if you're
yes.
watching
Thank
this, you
you.
can get it at Vault of Midnight, Ann Arbor, Detroit, or Grand Rapids. And yeah, if you want more, uh, Ryan Claytor and Elephant Eater Comics, you go to, where are you at on the internets and social media and all that?
Let's send them to ahunterstale.com right now, and
Nice.
after the campaign is over, they can always find me at elephanteater.com.
There you go. Dig it. All right. Well, thanks everybody for joining us. Thanks again to my guest Ryan Claytor. We really appreciate you, dude. And,
thank you, Curtis. Thank you.
Yeah. Wish you the best on a successful launch. Well, I guess it's already successful. You're already on Kickstarter, kicking butt. You're doing it, but once it gets out into the world, it reaches as many people as possible. So.
Thank you. I hope so.
All right, man. Well, you have a great rest of your night, and we'll talk with you soon. We'll see you around the shop, hopefully.
Definitely. Take care.
Thanks, brother.